public finance are in a very bad situation. Europe is clearly weak right now, more specifically in the face of the election of Donald Trump. I would say of 2025, things will start to get better because we can have more clarity on the political front.
First it was Germany, now France. Another government bites the dust. Why has wrangling over spending toppled Europe's biggest economies, and where next for a continent in crisis? Joining me is Charlotte de Montpellier, who's a senior economist at ING. Thank you very, very much, Charlotte, for taking the time for us today. A vote of no confidence in France's parliament has kicked out the government. This comes at a particularly sensitive time for the country, doesn't it?
Yes, indeed, because there are two things happening. First of all, economic growth is weakening. So we can see that in most European countries, but clearly sentiment is going down. We have weaker economic growth ahead. And then the second problem right now is that public finance are in a very bad situation. Actually, in 2024, the deficit compared to GDP is expected to reach more than 6%, 6.3 probably for 2024. So that's much too high. And there is a big need for any government to decrease this deficit, and for that to increase taxes or to decrease expenses. And that was the aim of Michel Barnier government. They were trying to reach 5% of GDP deficit for next year. That was they wanted to do. But of course, the fact that there is no government anymore means that they are not going to be able to reach that point, because the vote on the budget is not going to happen, at least not in the next few weeks. And that, of course, means that there will be no tax increase or expenses cuts in expenses going forward just directly. So that will postpone the moment where public finance will be started to get a bit back in order.
Yeah, so Michel Barnier, as Prime Minister, just couldn't find the consensus within Parliament to be able to pass this budget through. We'll get into a bit of the details on the budget in a second, but why are French finances in such a difficult state right now?
Yeah, it's a bit the consequence of what happened during the past few years. Of course, as in other countries in Europe, there was the pandemic, the energy crisis, but before that, there was also the yellow vest crisis with a lot of protesters against increasing taxation. So all of this, at the end, translates into higher expenses from the government. So there was a lot of public spending used to buy peace, I would say, at a national level. And that, of course, has increased quite strongly the debt and the expense level of the French economy. And at the same time, there was a lot of cuts in taxation. The aim of Macron, the first aim of Macron was to boost the potential of the economy through what he called supply side policy. So clearly helping the potential of the economy to grow. And one of the thing he was willing to do is to cut taxation, including taxes for companies. So the two together and a lot of crisis has led public finance in a very difficult situation. And in 2024, we actually reached the highest level with deficit to GDP around 6.3%. So it's much too high. And then now there is a big effort to do, which is, of course, the big problem of the government. And that's why the reason they fall, because big effort after a few years of where everyone was spending money and saying whatever it costs. It's very difficult to make it true and to help to make it vote, actually.
Yeah, and so it was basically what Michel Barnier wanted to do was introduce a package, a mix of spending cuts and tax increases. Now, of course, no one likes tax increases, but why was the budget so controversial? Because some commentators have said that the French public and politicians have to accept economic pain or face a serious economic crisis further down the road.
Yes, indeed, but it completely changed if you compare to the past few years, where there was there was no budgetary constraint anymore, actually. So it's really a shift, and people are not really willing to accept that there is a need of tax increase or lower expenses. And so each and every party at the parliament, they want to protect the people that vote for them. And at the end, since the parliament is very much divided in three big blocks, it makes it almost impossible to reach an agreement, because no one wants that anyone has to see the tax increase or the cuts in expenses. So that's a bit the situation. After a few years of whatever it costs, as Emmanuel Macron was always saying, it's very difficult to change mind. And that's the reason why it was not possible to reach a compromise at the parliament. But it also means that, the president will try to nominate a new prime minister and a new government in the next few weeks, but it will be also very, very difficult for any new government to reach an agreement on the budget. So the budget situation, the issue we have right now with no budget is likely to continue in the next few months, because any government will have a lot of difficulties to pass a budget when you start with a very deteriorated public finance situation.
Okay, so you're saying it's not just about the figures, it's also about winning hearts and minds, which is the very difficult thing at the moment. Though I do want to take just a quick look at France's cost of borrowing, looking at the 10-year bond yield. Now, it's remained relatively subdued after this after the no confidence vote, essentially. So does this mean that the panic over the government is overblown, that yes, things are difficult, but in the end things will be okay? What can we infer from this?
I think there are a lot of bad news that were already incorporated in the spreads. So the actual vote of no confidence that led to the fall of the government was actually, very much anticipated by the markets. So everything is it's already in there. It means that there is a worry on the public finance situation of France. It's likely that the spreads are not going to go down in the future, because, as I explained, there is no end of this political situation and difficulties of voting the budget in sight. But also, the situation in France is not considered too dramatic either, in the sense that markets and everyone knows that, at some point they will need to find a solution, and they will find a solution. They have means to increase taxation if they actually start to really believe that they need to do it. So it's not that we are afraid that France is not going to be able to meet its financial obligation or financial, what they need to finance next year, clearly. But it makes it more difficult to have a smooth path going back to a more normal level of deficit. So spreads are probably will continue to be high, but maybe it can even be a bit higher. But I'm probably not going to see it go through the roof, because the situation is not as dramatic as that, I would say.
Okay, and looking to Germany, where I'm talking to you from, the situation is different, but there are similarities. There's also been a lot of difficulties here, a coalition falling apart over economic policy. How serious is it that both of these countries have weak leadership at the top?
Yeah, that's a big issue actually for the Eurozone, I think, because we know that we have a lot of structural challenge to address. And the report from Mario Draghi explain most of them, all the issue we have regarding competitiveness and of the industry sector in Europe, weak growth in Europe. And when there is no strong leadership in France and in Germany, it means that probably it will be very difficult to find agreements in order to start to deal with those structural challenges. So I really believe that it means that those structural challenges are not going to be addressed during the next few months and quarters. And it also means that economic growth in Europe generally will probably remain quite weak because of all those domestic political situations that are having the front seat at the end and not leaving enough space leaving enough space in order for European authorities altogether to start to do something for the weak growth situation in Europe. So that's, of course, a very big concern. Let's see how it evolves, but Europe is clearly weak right now, and more specifically in the face of the election of Donald Trump, with all the trade tariff and things that can happen. It's clearly a risk for growth, for economic activity in Europe during the next quarters.
Okay, so certainly bad timing for all of this to be happening. Now, people accuse journalists and to some extent economists as well of talking about doom and gloom and highlighting the bad stuff. Where is the room for optimism here? Can we end on a high note? Where is the light at the end of the tunnel here?
Good question. So I think the situation right now in France is very specific, and that's we are likely to see a lot of political uncertainty during a few months. But at some point, I believe they will find a way forward. So when you reach such a high level of uncertainty, at some point, it can only improve. And that's a bit the same regarding economic growth. Of course, everything that is happening is a risk for economic activity during this winter. But at some point, we can hope, and we hope that during the second half, I would say, of 2025, things will start to get better because we can have more clarity on the political front. It can clearly help sentiment, and there we could see a kind of a recovery of economic activity. So a very difficult period right now, but it's not going to last forever. And at some point, we should see some kind of recovery, I believe.
Okay, Charlotte de Montpellier there on the battle between the hearts and minds and the raw figures. Thank you very much for your time.